Hey, this is Jonathan Gilliam, host of The Experts, creator of The Experts, the guy who brings the truth to you. I got to tell you, I can't thank you enough for all that you have done in helping me get the word out for this show, but I've got to challenge you. Remember, word of mouth is what gets this show out there and what gets the truth to the people. And if we're going to make this country great, it's you, the first branch of government, the people. You not only have to have the truth, but you have to be willing to act on it. And so I'm challenging all of you. Go tell 5 people. Hell, tell 10 people about this show. But tell people about this show. Help me get it out there. Help me get it promoted. Let's get the truth, which you know I bring. Let's get the truth out there. And let's start the show.
We need to put, just as I have said, and will continue to say, this is no time to panic. It still is no time to panic. It's time for smart, intelligent, aggressive, proactive action. And just as that is true, it is equally as true, this is not time for business as usual. The amount of anecdotes that we get, everything on one end from bars you literally can't get into over the weekend to not one single roll of toilet paper left in the entire state. We got to bring radically, dramatically, and immediately that behavior on both ends into a more equitable, more reasonable, more rational reality. We can't allow the business as usual culture to continue. Clearly, as I said, this does not come without a price. It will come with a big economic price. We understand that. If we do not act, the price will only be larger, both in humanity as well as economically. So there are some people out there who think this is fake news, and our friends, the Russians, I'm sure, are feeding that notion. This is not fake news. This is real. On behalf of all of us, is if we don't have this right, if we're not accurate about this, it's on me. This is real.
This is Jonathan Gilliam back in on the Experts podcast. And we are dropping the hammer down. And that was the New Jersey governor, Governor Phil Murphy, Democrat. And it's interesting what we're hearing from all these different politicians, especially on the Democrat side, you know, that you shouldn't panic. But yet, if you listen to that statement that he just made right there, and you're not somebody who's used to this type of an issue in your life, I would say that could, in and of itself could cause panic. And the most hilarious thing about that soundbite, and that, by the way, that's where he is notifying everybody that he's going to be calling out the National Guard, which is interesting. I got to stop using that word interesting. But all this stuff is so new. It's like we haven't seen this stuff ever in our lifetime that's going on right now. But when I keep wanting to call him Ralph Norton, but it's Governor Phil Murphy. Had to bring up the Russian thing. And this is what's very interesting about this. Once again, we need to have a drinking game where you guys, every time I say interesting, you either take a drink or you tweet me and tell me to stop. Here's the thing about that statement. Okay. The Democrats are the reason why while the people don't trust what the government is telling them. And one of those things, which he didn't help matters right there, is by talking about this nonsense about the Russians. We know that that wasn't true. Listen, were the Russians involved in something in the last election? Here's some news for you, folks. The Russians, the Iranians, the Cubans, even Israel, they're all involved in trying to manipulate our elections, just like we try to affect their elections. Obama had people on the ground in Israel when he was in office trying to mess with their elections. We have spies that work in other countries to try to mess with their elections. That's what happens. And they knew this, and that's why they tried to use it against the president, President Trump. Now, they are to blame for all this nonsense and all this distrust. You know, I will be perfectly honest with you. I'm totally critical of the Republican Party. I don't like political parties. I don't think, and that's why everybody says, well, I'm not in a political party. I'm a libertarian. You're in a political party. You see, and I've talked about this extensively on this program, we are the first branch of government. We are the people. Everything should be for us and by us. I don't know if you realize this, but the government is made up of American citizens. It's not like there's some kind of elite entity, but the political parties allow for that political elitist group of people that recruit their own. They recruit people just like them. You try to run for Congress, like out on Long Island, where they got this Gabarino, whatever his name is. He is a shoo-in for the Republican slot. Doesn't mean he's going to win. He's probably not going to win. But he's a shoo-in for that slot. Why? Well, he got endorsed by Peter King, who was a complete failure in the end of his career. Started going against the Second Amendment. Don't know what that was all about. But his dad is a huge donor to the Republican Party out here. And the Republican Party out on Long Island in New York is as crooked as they could be. They put in who they want, not who's best for the job. That is clearly evident. So I am not a fan of political parties. But the reason I say that is because I want to be totally honest, and I want people to realize this is not this is not a statement because I'm a conservative person. This is a statement of truth. People do not trust the government because of the majority of things that the Democrats do, not the Republicans. I mean, the Republicans do a lot. I just spitted out a couple of those. But I've noticed when I look at young people's comments on Facebook, for instance, and they're criticizing President Trump, just like they criticized President Bush, who I was no fan of. It's so predictable what people are going to say. And the majority of nonsense that they spout actually comes from the Democrat Party. Probably one of the most honest people that we ever saw that commentated on politics. And I didn't always agree with him. And George Carlin, who the comedian you may have heard of before, George Carlin was a veteran. I read some stories that, of course, I don't know the guy, but didn't sound like he had a really good time in the military. He was very rebellious, but nevertheless, he was a veteran. But when he spoke, I mean, at least 60% of the stuff that he says, I pretty much agree with. And it's brutally honest. And it's not always a hit on the political parties, but a hit on us as citizenry. And when I listen to his stuff and I listen to the things that he says, he's spot on when he talks about this stuff. And so when I have a beef with, and I say that these problems are caused by the Democrat Party, you can weigh it off of that. I mean, he speaks because he sees this stuff because he had a hard time in the military or whatever, but he always saw a lot of these things. And when I listened to the videos of Yuri Bezmenov, who was a Russian KGB propaganda specialist who defected to the United States in the 80s, and you listen to what he has to say, the playbook was written by the left. The playbook for subversion was written by the left. So the majority of things that you hear uneducated young people and highly educated older people all comes from the subversive talking points. And that's the left, not the right. So when I hear, this governor of New Jersey talking about how we can't panic, but we can't do business as usual. Well, what he's not saying there is that business as usual is the Democrats' way of lying and subverting and spreading propaganda. That's business as usual. And like I said, the Republicans do a lot of stuff, but it's kind of in-house. They do stuff in-house. They play those political games in Washington, D.C. and in the different districts where they're getting congressmen and stuff in there. But it's primarily a political thing, not a subversive thing. They're not trying to change the Constitution. You never hear about Republicans or conservatives talking about how, and the Democrats go through this systematic check, like the First Amendment, you shouldn't be able to say this, you can't say, which goes completely against the First Amendment. The Second Amendment, well, you shouldn't have guns. Guns are meant only for this, and you can only have this kind of gun. And totally fake. You look at the writings of the Founding Fathers, you look at the way the Second Amendment itself is written, cannot be infringed, will not be infringed upon. But they're the ones who go out and try to change it. So when he makes that statement, in my eyes, he sounds like a buffoon. Now, I don't know the content of his character. I don't know. But I know that since he's been in office, he's gone after several of our rights. I don't live in Jersey, but he's gone after, you try driving through, do not drive through Jersey if you have a concealed weapons carry permit in other states. Don't even drive through Jersey. You have the wrong ammunition, you're going to go to jail automatically. You have too much ammunition, you're going to go to jail automatically. There was a woman who had a concealed weapons carry permit in Pennsylvania, which borders with New Jersey. I don't remember if she had to go pick her daughter up or something, but she literally drove like 4 miles down the road into New Jersey and then was heading back, and she got stopped, and she had her gun that was legal 2 miles away with ammunition that was legal 2 miles away. She was immediately arrested, and I don't remember how the court case lasted, but it's an automatic 1 year in jail. I think she may have gotten off on that. I don't know, but it was a long, drawn-out case, and it was very ridiculous when she lived right down the road. And had she gone a couple more miles, would have been nothing. So these politicians and their snowflakes and all of you out there that have bought into this, you need to realize that when he says stuff like that, you should not, if you're left in this, or you consider yourself liberal, you should be thinking about the fact that everything he's saying is stuff that they created. And that's why people don't trust. That's why they're having a hard time with that. Now, I got to be honest with you. They're doing these briefings every day from the White House. And the best thing the president has done is not answer questions from the media. He needs to just say what he's going to say and then leave. But the problem is with all of these people, right? 100% of the people in Washington, D.C., including our president, is that they are not prepared for these things. Now, the president is a manager of this stuff. And I've said this last week, and I'll say it again, and I also said it in a tweet, is that it's difficult to measure someone who's never been in politics before and say, you're doing that wrong, because it's the first time they've ever had to deal with it. And this, quite frankly, to this extent and this much unknown, has never been dealt with in our lifetime. I mean, not in my lifetime, not to this extent. You'd have to go back to my grandparents and perhaps my parents, back to, before I was actually born. I was born in 1969. But this president's never dealt with that. He's not a politician from Washington, D.C. So when he comes up there, he is trying to manage the problem and manage the people. And I think ultimately when he gets reelected, the true test of who he is will then be exerted, because if we face something else like this, I would hope that he realized that politicians and agency directors are the biggest buffoons in the United States when it comes to being prepared. They haven't even considered this stuff. And the way that they brief absolutely shows, because these snap decisions that they're doing, instead of saying, okay, we're getting to this point, we're going to have to now close the restaurants. Okay, we've got to this point, no more gatherings. Okay, we get to this point. Okay, now we're going to have National Guard. Okay, listen, if they had a plan and had pre-thought these things, what you would be seeing is a group of people that are, from the very beginning, would be informing you of the potential that this could have, the steps that must be taken, and how we avoid prolonged social distancing, how we avoid prolonged days where you can't go see a concert or can't go see a movie or can't, go to work, for instance, or your kids can't go to school. Had they had experience and forward thought these things, what we would be seeing is details about, this is what we're going to do and this is what we want you to do, and here's what we're dealing with. But they don't work like that. And so now what they're doing is 100% reactionary. 100% reactionary. They're following the curve. Dr. Michael Lucarini that we have here on the show, I would have had him on here today, but I waited too late for some of these things to develop, and I'm sure he's asleep now. But this other doctor sent him a diagram that showed the different way that the viruses, once they were discovered and where they've gone. And it's kind of a difficult, I need to actually talk to that doctor, but it basically what it's showing is a couple things. One, we're at a point now where Italy is the way we're kind of following them on the grid, and their curve of where things went up and have started minutely to kind of level off a very small amount. We're 15 days behind that, 12 to 15 days. So we're experiencing what they experienced 12 to 15 days ago. And one of the most important things on there is that it shows that if we socially distance ourselves and they make all these hard decisions and we lock it down for 30 or 15 days or 30, that's why they keep talking about 15 days. It's because there's a correlation there. What we should see is the curve start to flatten out and the number of people that are sick flatten out, because we don't want to reach this 50% of our ER rooms taken, because once we reach 50% of all the ERs in the country, or not 50%, but when all the ERs in the country are 50% full or more, we are looking at a hospital or a medical system that is going to collapse, because they cannot sustain the workload. We don't have enough hospitals or nurses or doctors to sustain that. You know, I talked to a good buddy of mine who I've mentioned on here. I'm not mentioning by name. He didn't want me to mention him by name, but he is in the hospital in Washington State where they've now lost 30 people. And he is right there. Right there. He handled several of the first people that came in there that were sick in this country and died. And he's telling me, you know, this guy's got tremendous military training. He's gone through incredibly tough stuff, and he's exhausted, and he knows the staff is exhausted, and they're so full that the only way they get a bed is if somebody dies, because nobody's going home. Not when they get into the ICU, not when they get to the ER. Typically when people go there, it's bad. It's real bad. So he has seen the extreme. And if that curve that they're hoping happens within 15 days does not occur and people continue to get sicker, they're going to edge their way into that area where it's dangerous for a collapsing medical system. So if we had leaders that weren't 100% reactive, I believe that curve, well, there's a couple things. One is the leadership. I'll talk about the other in just a second. But the leadership that had already considered these things, leaders that not just had a plan for everything, because you can't plan for everything, but people that quickly see, okay, we've talked about this before in the past. We've done training scenarios of this. We know this is how we're going to brief the people. We know that this, and see, here's the thing. In this type of circumstance, they know, medical professionals know, that if you have a virus that comes in and it is bad, this is the extreme, and that is not the extreme, right? So they know that the potential it could get this particular bad. And I have my hand up in the air right here, so I'm giving you a scale. So the high scale, they say doctors could have told you, and infectious disease specialists could have told you, you know, last year, 2 years ago, that if it got into this country and it's a really bad virus, the possibility of these terrible things happening because we don't do these things, it could occur. And knowing that, the leaders in this country could have said, okay, so if we get a virus in here, because a virus is one of those things, it's like there's these deadly things that kill human beings tremendously. You know, a meteor hitting I think it's a meteor hitting the earth, a great big rock coming in and pounding into the earth could cause mass extinction. That's one. Earthquakes. Two. Every year we have hurricanes, and every year they make it up how they're going to respond to it. And with this virus, this is one of those big natural things, although I'm questioning whether or not this one was natural, man-made. But nonetheless, if they had pre-thought this, they could have already thought this through their brain. And so they could have prepared the people better by saying, this is what we're dealing with. We've talked about this in the past, had some training in worst case scenarios for this, and this is what we want to do in order to keep it from getting to a worst case scenario. What we would like you to do from the very beginning, they could have said this. We want you to taper off from going to restaurants. We want you to take a weekend away from a concert, from a sporting event. Stay at home. We want you to buy non-perishable items, such as, I haven't seen one list from a doctor on television in an official capacity, or a mayor or a governor or even the president giving a list of things that people should buy, or having it online and saying, this is where you go to get that information. But if they had forward thought these things, they could have those there and say, if you don't rush to the grocery store, the stores are not going to run out of food. We're going to make sure of that. That's our part. So when you go to the store and you buy your, you know, the things that you like on a regular basis, your Pop-Tarts and your potato chips and, you know, your fruits and vegetables, also purchase extra rice, extra beans. If you get meat and you buy some meat in bulk, put it in your freezer and freeze it. Cut it up in smaller portions. I mean, just prepare yourself for the possible worst case scenario. They could make mini preppers out of everybody real quick, but they don't work like that. They don't work like that for a couple reasons. One, because they think that you're too stupid or you're too fragile or that you won't vote them back in office because they're going to think, oh, this guy's blowing it out of proportion. But if they thought about it and had gone through some training scenarios or talked to some experts, they could have laid this out in a very, very calm manner and a structured manner, because that's what we're not seeing. We're not seeing the population functioning in a structured manner. So they could have done that, but they don't know how. They literally don't know how to do that beforehand. And so now we're dealing with, no more concerts, no more basketball games. Don't go to the doctor if you feel bad. Call them first, and maybe we'll be able to get a test kit there. See, all this stuff could have been thought out. It could have all been thought out years ago. And when it happened, certain plans of action could have come into play. Man, they could have even done this last year and said, we're going to have a nationwide fire drill, if you will, virus drill, and say, this is a drill, but this is what we would do federally, and we would hope that the states would do, and put it out and the State of the Union addresses are the dumbest thing I've ever seen. In the period of time that these presidents go up there and give these State of the Union addresses, they could have taught every single person in the country, if we ever have a viral attack, this is what we want you to do. And you can go to UnitedStatesGovernment.net or whatever and download these things and have them in your house. And that way, people are mentally prepared for this and they have the knowledge for it. They don't do it. They think you're too stupid. That's why they tell you when there's a terrorist attack that there's no known threats or that even before an event. They'll come on TV and they say, and they always have the mayor, maybe the governor there. They have the big chiefs of police back there, and somebody from the federal service, and they say there's no known threats of attack. Okay, we're always under a threat of attack. Just because you don't have the specifics for it does not mean that the people in this country should just go, oh, there's no known threats. Let's just booze it up and party down because it's never going to happen. They said there's no threat. Well, there's always a threat. I don't care how peaceful history is. You're always under a threat. There's madmen that are always born. And if they get themselves into power or they get some kind of belief system, they'll carry out violent attacks. And you know what? We're always under a threat for viruses. We're always under a threat for things falling from the skies. So why don't we put our best minds together and come up with standard operating procedures for the citizenry and for the leaders and how we're going to manage these problems? They don't do that. They don't do that. They wait until it happens. And I'm telling you, folks, I've seen the way this works. That's the way that the military works. That's why when you talk to veterans and they're discussing this stuff, they roll their eyes, or people say, oh, that veteran thinks they know everything. Well, we've been trained to think like this. We don't make stuff up as we go along in the military. We may get into fluid situations, but what we do then is we take the training that we have and we apply it to that situation. But you do not see this in politics. You don't see it in the citizenry. Politicians don't want to deal with it because they're afraid they'll make the wrong decision. They're afraid it's going to make them look bad or make their party look bad. And the people are just their power has been taken away. The majority of people in this country think they have to be taken care of. And it's not true. So that's where my frustration in all this lies. I mean, how could they not have realized all these drug companies out there, and the government should be, if you want to regulate stuff, this is what you regulate. How could they not have known right? Every major virus that we have had, and you know what? F CNN. I don't care what they think, or MSNBC, or any of these little tulips that walk around thinking that everything is racist. Well, not everything in this world is racist, okay? Almost every major virus we've had in recent history has come from China and come from Wuhan, China, right in that one particular dirty place over in that communist country. And there's probably no telling what else occurs over there, and they just keep it because, they got billions of people over there. And if they lose 10,000 or 40,000, you'll never even know it outside of that country. Now, did they manufacture this? It's a possibility. So why don't the leaders consider that long before it happens? This is not something that, like, I remember hearing Canada after they had a terrorist attack, and they're like, terrorism has come to our borders. Guess what, Canada? Terrorism has been at your borders for a long time. It just traveled through Canada and got to the United States. And it's stupid. The rest of the world has been suffering from terrorism. But yet it was a surprise. I just couldn't believe it happened. Well, you're the one that invites Islam, fundamental Islam, into your country like it's, the Girl Scouts. So when I hear these people say that these are racial statements, most of them have said it themselves. First of all, there's a great soundbite. I'm gonna have to play it in one of the shows this week, where CNN and all these other, mainly CNN, is saying the exact same thing they said that the president said was racist. We have, bottom line here, folks, we have the ability to forward think these things, and we have the ability as the citizenry to be taught and to be aware and to have the truth where they tell us this is always a potential threat. Nothing we can do about it. It's not a political thing, but we should be able to deal with this when it comes by exercising the standard operating procedures. But the deputy directors and the directors, they don't do it because many of them, well, most of them, they didn't succeed up. They were pulled up because they were like-minded. Many of them failed once they get to a certain position. Instead of firing them, they kind of give them a little boost, and they actually get promoted. And then the politicians, you know what it reminds me of? You know what politics reminds me of? NASCAR back in the day, back before Richard Petty, or even the beginnings of NASCAR and Richard Petty. It was a bunch of people that were running moonshine. Junior Johnson, he was running moonshine. That's how it developed into races, because they had to soup up their cars so they go really fast to get away from the cops. So they have these race cars, and it developed into that. So the majority of people that were racing were not rich. They made enough money to build these cars, and then they would, and then it got bigger. The sport got bigger. And as the sport got bigger and they got corporate sponsors, the drivers got younger, smaller, and richer. And now it's a rich boys game. You're not going to go into NASCAR, if you're really good. Like, let's say you got a go-kart, you saved up some money, you're a poor kid, and you got a go-kart, and you drive like the Dickens. Well, the chance of you being a NASCAR racer are slim to none unless somebody discovers you and says, that kid's got a talent, because it's a rich man's game. And that's politics. You're not going to become a congressman or a senator unless you are connected. And many of those people went to these Ivy League schools, which, the majority of policies that we have in this country that are crappy were made by these people, by these same people. We say, well, he's a Harvard grad, he must be a genius. Well, go look at all the policies, all the bad court decisions that have been handed down by Harvard law graduates. It's pretty staggering when you realize that Harvard, Yale, I've heard some of the worst arguments and word salads come out of people from Yale and Columbia, and they're all ideologically bent. They don't come out of there like Socrates, knowing that they do not know, and they don't come out there like that. They come out of there knowing, I know this, I know this, I know this. And so when they join their lackeys in Washington, D.C., or at the head of these companies, they make god-awful decisions. Terrible decisions. I don't know why I say god-awful, because God doesn't make awful decisions, but they make awful decisions. And many of those judges, those Supreme Court justices, all of them are, you don't see, Justice so-and-so who went to community college and finally got to go to a 4-year school to graduate. You don't see that. You don't see, Judge Lisa or Judge John that graduated from, University of Arkansas online. You don't see that. Yet when you talk to a lot of those people in their career fields, they excel. So where am I going with all this? I was saying the bottom line is that they are not prepared, and they live amongst themselves as some of the most incompetent people, narcissistic people, many of them criminally minded in the country. Would never, most of the people in Washington, D.C., if I opened up a company, I would never hire them. I would never hire them because they're tainted or they're just dumb. But yet they walk around and they say things that would get us arrested and do things. They do things that would get us arrested. But they walk around like they are the duck's nuts, like they are the ones that everybody should follow. They're the great leaders. Yet every time we get tested like this, every single time they fail. And President Trump is stuck with that. So I don't know if he's going to learn. It's hard to learn these lessons when you're in the midst of it. You as an individual inside of an agency or head of an agency, it's difficult to see reality. It's like if you stand up, somebody paints 100-foot mural on a wall, and then they walk you with a blindfold up to the wall 2 feet away, and they say you can only stare. You got to keep your head straight, but you can turn your eyes left and right, up and down. And they take the blindfold off of you, and then they ask you, "What is it? What is this picture?" You can tell the colors. You're probably not going to be able to tell what the picture is. You're too close. But if somebody was to take you back a couple 100 feet, you could sit there and describe the whole picture. Well, the president got his nose crammed into the wall. That's how, not because of his own doing, but that's what happens when you're in that office. So I don't know if he's going to be able to see what's going on. I don't know. There's no master plan, by the way, QAnons. There's no master plan. And this, one thing I'm going to read before I go off here today, I've got to remember to read this, is something somebody sent me from one of these Q nut jobs. Listen, if you're an honest, good patriot, step away from that nonsense. It's ridiculous, and it's more dangerous than the mainstream media. But now I said that's one thing that keeps us from being prepared, these politicians and all this stuff. But the other thing is that the people in this country, you are just not prepared. It is the end of the world when I think there's more people distraught because they're being told what to do or what is best for them. And it eliminates some of the things that they find joy in for a period of time. And they literally can't handle that. It reminds me of like if you took a 5-year-old and you gave him a present for Christmas and then told him you can't play with it for 2 weeks. Okay? It can sit here. You can think about it and look at it, but you can't play with it for 2 weeks because, I don't know, we're waiting. The batteries are bad in it, and we got to wait for new batteries to get here. That 5-year-old would be distraught beyond belief for 2 weeks. Probably pitch a fit, mad, sleep with the truck every night or whatever it was. And people, adults, they don't know how to function. And there's this family in Mississippi, I believe it was. It was either Mississippi or Louisiana. I really don't want to get this wrong, but I don't have it. Let's just take a break real quick. We'll come back, and then I'll have it. We'll be right back. Hey, this is Jonathan Gilliam, and of course you're listening to the experts, so you know it's Jonathan Gilliam. So I have a book called Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. I always try to talk about it and do at least one little commercial here. This is going to be a short one because I think you see exactly in what's going on in the world, even though this is a virus, you can still be prepared. Remember, I always talk about this, being prepared. It means you're prepared before these things happen, right? That's how you have a plan. And it's very easy to keep yourself out of a violent situation. It's very easy to avoid most dangerous things. And in the cases of like this virus from spreading, if you typically wash your hands and have good hygiene, you're much less possible of getting this virus. So Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival was written for you. I show you how attackers look at you and how you can take your life and divide it into sectors and then target each sector. So instead of saying, I'm going to secure my life, you secure each sector. Your home in the mornings, different than your commute to work. That's different than when you're at work, different than when you're at lunch, different when you're at a special event, and so on and so forth. Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness teaches you how attackers look at those sectors, because different sectors have different attackers that prey on different vulnerabilities, that exploit those vulnerabilities to get at different critical assets at different critical times to get to those criticalities. The avenues of approach are different because it's in different places. Once you learn how to look at that, then the second half of the book shows you how to defend and set up defenses against that, to have plans of action, and how to act instead of just react. It's got 2 workbooks that go with it. The threat assessment workbook covers the first half of the first book, Sheep No More, and the second workbook, the defense assessment workbook, goes with those defenses that I just discussed. Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival is 2 workbooks. Trust me, if you get it, it will change your life. And that's the truth. Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, everywhere books are sold. Let's get back to the show. Okay, it was Missouri. So a father, so let me just put it this way. A woman comes back from Italy, a young woman, and she comes home. I think she'd been studying abroad or working abroad. She comes home and she has symptoms of coronavirus. And so they take her to the hospital, and the hospital runs tests on her, but they have to wait for those tests. So they told her, go back to your home and self-quarantine. And the father and his other daughter, and I don't know who else was in the house, you all should quarantine yourself as well. Don't go out. Don't do anything, because you may have it or you may be a carrier if she has it. And so they went home, and this jackass of a dad decides to go with the other daughter to a school function of all things. To a school function, and disobeyed what the doctors said that they should do because they weren't made to do it. Now, the one who came back from Italy, she was very responsible, and she stayed quarantined. And as it turns out, she was the first case in Missouri. Wait, did I say Missouri? Yeah, in Missouri, who tested positive for the coronavirus. Now, that to me is just outright. Again, I'm trying not to curse on this show because I don't curse a lot, but it seems like when I get behind this mic, some of these words are perfect examples. And I know there's young people who listen to this show, and I don't want you to think that you got to use curse words, but I got to tell you, the perfect definition for this, well, it's jackass or asshole. I mean, either way, there's an ass in it. And this guy and his daughter, listen, I really, really believe that when we stopped paddling people in school, we did a great disservice to this country. I would love to see somebody like him bent over and paddled like a 10-year-old, because that's the type of mentality that we're dealing with, There's another guy in Kentucky that had to be locked up and held by law enforcement because he had the coronavirus and refused to quarantine. And supposedly, I heard this in passing, but I didn't see the report. But supposedly there's a woman in South Korea that defied the quarantine and went out and infected something like 80,000 people, I think, is what the report that I heard. I need to check into that. But, I mean, this whole thing, this is what's crazy about the whole thing, okay? If the people in this country had been informed from the very beginning, not from the very beginning, but years ago, that if we have a virus, this is the way we must treat it. And for a very short period of time, you are going to have to go on lockdown. But let's do it yourself. Voluntary lockdown. If they had done that several years ago, and then this occurred, you would still deal with the jackasses. But we would be in a totally different place than we are now. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know where we're exactly at, but I don't think we're as bad as it could be, because I think the president stopped that travel from China. He's locked down the airports, and a lot of these states are taking it upon themselves to close things down, and the sporting events and the concerts. I mean, Live Nation, they're doing a great job for and thinking this stuff. And I know there's people out there, because I heard this one knucklehead when I posted on something, because somebody said something, on Facebook, and you post something, he comes back, and the argument was absolutely ridiculous that this guy had, because he thinks that it's all fake. Now, where does he get that untrust? I talked about that at the beginning of the show. He gets that untrust because of the way the Democrats have handled themselves and have tried to subvert this country. And I don't blame him for that. But if we all together just thought about what is the worst case scenario for this, then it would not be a surprise. And you would know what to do. And you would say, well, I don't care what the government, see, this is the mindset you should have. I don't care what the government says, how bad it is or how it's not that bad. I'm self-quarantining. I'm not going anywhere for 2 weeks. I mean, I went out and bought gym equipment. This is honest to goodness. I went and bought gym equipment because I go to the gym every night, and I'm not stepping foot inside of a gym where people sweat and sneeze and don't clean up after themselves. And it sucks too, because man, at Planet Fitness, God bless you, they have massage chairs. If you buy the black card, which isn't expensive at all, you get use of the massage chairs, and they got these other things, these beds that you lay on. It has waterproof material on it, and so it shoots up hot water in a jet into your back. It's the best thing I've ever had for my back, because I've got bad discs in my back from getting pounded in the ground jumping out of airplanes. So Planet Fitness, thank you. But I went and bought my own gym equipment. I didn't have to wait for them to shut. Now the gyms are shut down, but I went and bought gym equipment because I want to be able to still work out. But see, I think like I'm telling you that they should be telling you to think. I think like that because I've been trained to think like that. When I took over the special events program for the New York office of the FBI, and don't think special events is like where I'm a party planner. The special events unit in the FBI is the unit that goes and should, if it's ran properly, which, when I took over, it was ran properly because I didn't wait for things to happen. I went out and did my own threat assessments using my experience and training. I tried to pick out very vulnerable and less vulnerable targets that could get hit. I tried to associate with the planners from the NYPD. Didn't go so well because the super chiefs don't want anybody telling them how they should do anything. Not that I ever told them what to do, but trying to show them that this is how I'm looking at this. Do you want to share information? No, they didn't want anything. And it's so hilarious when I was working with these NYPD chiefs, some of them are really nice guys. I mean, they're cops, but what's funny is how dismissive they were because I was in the FBI. And full well knowing my background, but dismissive, and would make it seem as though, you're a small fish in a big pond. We don't need you telling the NYPD how to do counterterrorism. But yet I go to all their events and I'm working there and I've got my own people there and I'm looking at how I ran things from a military perspective, having been an attacker. And I'm sitting here looking at all their stuff. And I know if they were my target, I know I could hit that venue. Know it for a fact. Not because I have inside knowledge, but just because I'm looking around and I say, okay, there's a vulnerability I could exploit. There's an avenue of approach I could take. There's a target that I could hit. Why? Because people get into these executive positions and they think they know it all and they fail to prepare. So what they do is stick people out there, smoke and mirrors, and then it's all reactive, 100% reactive. So I tell you what. Let's take a break, and I'm going to come back, and I'm going to read the post that this guy and I, the conversation that we had back and forth, because I think it's important for you to hear so that we can see, what the difference is between hype and reality. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Hey, this is Jonathan Gilliam. If you've been listening to this podcast, you've heard me talk about my new book that's coming out April 7th, The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children. I can't think of a more important time than right now in securing your children in every way of life. Whether it's washing their hands or looking out for bad guys, understanding that you shouldn't play behind the tire of a car. These are lessons that are going to be in this book so that you can teach your child safety and security, awareness and communication at the youngest age. The book is all pictures, and each picture has between 3 and 5 lessons in there that are added into the picture. And what the parent does then is we're developing a website right now to be ready when the book comes out, but it's going to have lesson plans on there for the parent. So the parent takes the lesson plans, they give the book to the child. As the child goes through the pictures, the parent goes through the lesson plan and teaches the child to be aware, safe, secure, and how to communicate. The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children. You have to go get it. Everywhere books are sold, you can get it right now, pre-order, but it comes out April 7th. That is the way you secure your homeland. Let's get back to the show. So this Facebook post that I had, my good buddy John Cardillo had posted something, and so I felt the need, because I care about my friends on Facebook, and I don't do a whole lot on my personal page. I'll be honest with you, I really don't. Most of my stuff that I put is directly on my public page, and I really wish I didn't have a personal page. I just wish everybody would go to my public page, but I have certain friends and stuff on there. And John Cardillo used to be on Newsmax, had his own show that I used to fill in for every now and then, had made a post. And so I wanted to inform people what I found out. So, and I mentioned this on here. I'm going to read all these posts in their entirety, the back and forth that I had with this guy. It wasn't John Cardillo. It was another follower of his. And I said, I have a close friend that handled patient 0 in Washington State and has had 30 subsequent deaths under his watch in the ER. He is no BS. We served together in the Navy. His take on this is that it is very lethal. Those that get it, if it goes into their lungs, it is deadly, and there is nothing they can do. And it is not like the regular flu. However, the real problem is that the potential of hospitals becoming rapidly overwhelmed to a point that there is nothing they can do for anyone. If that were to happen, the medical system would figuratively collapse. The interesting thing is all this could be stopped in its tracks if everybody that can just stayed home for a few weeks. I mean, really stayed inside and didn't go out except to get food and work if completely necessary. But that's like asking a 5-year-old not to play with their new Christmas toy for 2 weeks. That's when I came up with that, by the way. So somebody comes on there and says, thank you very much for saying that. And then this other guy, we'll just call him Steve, comes on and says, and quotes me, He's a quote, if that were to happen, the medical system would figuratively collapse, unquote. And he writes, you really believe that? And so I wrote him back. I said, yes, if the numbers were high. When I say collapse, we are talking about exhaustive medical personnel who are all working around the clock and medications and supplies being depleted. This is not hype. It is the worst case scenario, which should be considered. All of that could be avoided to an extent if people would enjoy a few weeks of downtime at home. So he has to come back. I mean, I figured that was the end of it. So he comes back, he says, yes, it's hype, because people want to argue. And this is the problem, is that these people go and make posts on other social media platforms, and then people believe this stuff. He says, yes, it is hype. It is spreading the panic, which I'm not spreading the panic. He says hospitals will have to triage people, use the available medicines where it will do the most good. I'm retired military. I've worked for 96 plus hours at a time. You do what has to be done and get the job done. Okay, Mr. Military. He goes on to say, take a deep breath, people. Wash your hands and quit picking your nose. How many people at home have their windows open to get some fresh air? Welcome to kindergarten. Now that we've gotten everyone to wash their hands, shapes and colors are next. Haha, he's a smart ass, this guy, right? So we've had dumbass, jackass, and now we got smart ass. So I come back with him and I say this, great, you like to work, but these are people who are not used to working 96 hours. And if it is like my buddy's hospital, they have been working nonstop for several weeks and the entire staff is exhausted. Now, if any of them get sick, then the number of staff gets depleted even more. The medications that are short because they are manufactured in China. So the consideration of worst possible scenarios would be considered by national leaders in order to avoid this. I go on to say, is the media hyping this? Absolutely. And I have been posting on this as well, but having an attitude that this is nothing at all is even more stupid and dangerous, as most of us are aware that the media is fake, inflammatory information. As for you being a veteran, I was a SEAL, as was my buddy who was on the front line in this virus in the hottest ER in the nation. I guarantee we both work more hours than 99.999% of the world's population, yet I'm here to tell you he is exhausted and he is very concerned with the potential. That is the truth, and that is where I get my info. Not news, not conspiracy theorists, and certainly not people like yourself, Steve, that stubbornly refuse to consider the worst case scenario. So I hope you see at home as I read this, how ridiculous this conversation is. And I cut it off here in just a second because I'm actually shocked that somebody who says that they're a veteran is arguing with me because I'm pointing out facts so people can prepare themselves for what potentially could happen. And so that they're informed and they understand why 15 days of quarantine are important. Steve answers me. He says, no, you are wrong. Of course I'm wrong. Everybody's wrong but Steve, evidently. I don't know Steve. He says, no, you're wrong. I don't like to work, but you do what you have to do. Triage the patients. Have I considered the worst case? Yes. Have I taken the appropriate action for myself and my family? Yes. Well, good for you, Steve. Good for you. But this isn't for you then, because you've done what you had to do. So he should just go away. But he doesn't. To say I haven't is juvenile on your part. I never said that he didn't. My wife works at a hospital. I don't know when she will come home. As a SEAL, you should know that you plan for the worst, and we have. You appear to have gotten your info from one source. I haven't. Okay, so he's thinking that this one source is where I get my information. Mine comes from various hospitals, doctors, and their officials, which I doubt very seriously. I run in a circle of a lot of doctors because one of my greatest mentors in life, Dr. Wally Grant, who's passed on in heaven right now watching this and listening to it, I'm sure, he was a neurosurgeon. And so I, spent many, many weekends and vacations with him and everybody else who's a doctor. So these are the people, and we're talking neurosurgeons, we're talking heart surgeons, we're talking dermatologists. We're talking all different kinds of doctors. Pediatrics, infection specialists or infectious specialists, and ER doctors. So I get my information from all these people, including health teachers who know quite more than you would think. He goes on to say, people have panicked. If they don't have a fever or the sniffles, give them a Quaalude and send them home. Now he's just being a jerk, right? So this is my last post to him. I said, you shouldn't assume that is my only source. Go listen to my podcast. See, I take advantage of that, where I have several hours of interviewing Dr. Michael Lucarini. I have several other contacts, including neurosurgeons and infectious disease specialists. You say you are fully prepared. Okay, great. Glad to hear it. But if someone is looking for information about how to prepare and they read your comments, then they would think this is no big deal and it's 100% hype, including when you bash the facts that I posted for the benefit of informing people. You have taken a post with good info about worst case scenarios and turned it into a worthless debate. That is just as bad as fake news. So what you will say what you will in response. That's my last post. Good luck. And I guess you probably want to hear what he has to say. That's what you said. So this is his quote. I'm here to tell you he is exhausted and he is very concerned with the potential. That is the truth, and that is where I get my info. See, he just wanted to come back and argue about where I get my info. I didn't read this yet. And you leave without finishing the discussion. Typical in this day and age. It's only typical for me when I'm dealing with an idiot who won't shut their mouth and listen and think that they know everything and always have a rebuttal that doesn't amount to anything. That debate didn't amount to anything for him. The original post that I put in there and the information subsequent to that is real information that people need to hear and is not being given to them by officials. And this is what burns me up. The Q people, I'm going to read this to you. And this goes right along with this. I got this, somebody sent me this picture of something that's going across with Q. I think this was somebody that was predicting something, but they didn't know if it's true, or this is a Q dump. I don't know which one it is. I really don't pay, I pay only enough attention to this stuff to do my research for these debates. It says, here's some, and now again, this is fake. Okay. This is all crazy. And I want you all to hear this because I want you to realize how utterly crazy this whole QAnon movement is. There are people out there that are pretending to be insiders in the government with this Q clearance, which is a Department of Energy clearance. And so I don't know why somebody in the Department of Energy would know all the stuff that Donald Trump is doing, but you'll see how crazy this is. So here's some inside info you won't hear in the news. This morning at 4:30 a.m., our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, so this Q person comes from Canada. Our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, was served a criminal indictment by the U.S. for corporate and financial crimes. Now, don't you think that would have made it in the news if that was true? Remember, this isn't fake news from the left. This is fake news from people on the right that say they're patriots, okay? Media owners were instructed to historically brainwash everyone that Prime Minister has coronavirus with his wife and that they won't be leaving their houses for a while. Yeah, that's insane. Here's a good one. Tom Hanks was arrested 48 hours ago for pedophilia, and he is currently being kept in a hotel room in Australia, refusing to fly back to the USA. Next celebrities arrested will be Celine Dion, Madonna, Charlie Barkley, I don't know who that is, Kevin Spacey, all who claim coronavirus infections. I haven't heard any of those people claiming it. Italy's airports have been completely shut down as over 80 of the Vatican and financial offices have been served same criminal indictments for financial crime, pedophilia, child trafficking, and sex abuse. But this didn't get reported. So that's true. He said this person goes on, and again, I think I remember, this is a guy saying that based on what he's seen in the Q post, this is what he thinks is happening. And the crazy part of this, I wish I would have copied this, are the comments after it. One lady writes, "I've got the chills after reading that." Where do these people come from? It goes on to say, United Emirates have completed mass arrests of their own royal family and affiliates. Convicted Hollywood rapist Harvey Weinstein agreed to a deal in exchange for his testimony against hundreds of top Hollywood celebrities and their involvement in the drug business, pedophilia, child trafficking. Instead of 55-year sentence, he only received 23 years. So you're telling me that Harvey Weinstein, who is he's getting up there in years, 23 years is going to be a life sentence for him. He's not going to get parole. He's going to do 23 years, and he's probably going to die in prison. But according to this guy, he traded that. It wouldn't really, he said instead of 55 years sentence, he only received 23 years. Well, whoever did that for him didn't do him any favors. That's for sure, because he's dead for life anyway. In exchange, he provided testimonies against some of the biggest and most powerful names, including Prince Andrew of UK, former President Bill Clinton. I think they pretty much screwed themselves. Former Vice President Joe Biden, Tom Hanks, Oprah, Ellen DeGeneres, Quentin Tarantino, Charlie Sheen, everybody he hates in Hollywood, and I think are very leftist. He's named them all. Bob Saget, Kevin Spacey, John Travolta, Steven Spielberg, Podesta, the NXIVM and Pizzagate sex trafficking clubs, and hundreds of more who are all directly involved with Jeffrey Epstein. In exchange of Jeffrey Epstein's testimony, he was allowed to make a deal and have his suicide in prison faked, according to this guy. There's only one more paragraph of this. Deal with me. CEOs of some major world corporations have been indicted, arrested, and some forced to resign, all in the last 30 to 60 days, such as CEO of NBA, Harley-Davidson, Gates Foundation, Intel, McDonald's, Caesar Awards, Vatican, Chief of Police, Disney, etc. Oof. Now, none of that is true. And the guy who, after he wrote it, the comments were, it's really tragic. These comments are tragic. And it just goes to show you, folks, same conversation I'm having with this guy. You have to be smarter than this. There are people, and I fell into it, are debating with this guy. And there are professional trolls out there. But what's actually worse than trolls, because you can tell the trolls and you can kind of get away from them. These people are narcissistic fruitcakes, or they are criminals trying to make $1 off of you. I was watching, I know people are going to think I'm a geek when I say this. I guess I'm a big flight simulator guy, but my desktop Mac crashed last year, and I haven't had a flight simulator since. One day when I get rich and famous, I'm going to have one of those whole setups where you can fly around with virtual reality. That would be cool. I probably would. Let me tell you, if I had one of those right now, I could do a self-quarantine for a year probably. But anyway, these guys were, they make videos of their video games, and they put it on YouTube, and they're flying around in these, it's incredibly realistic, and they're doing bombing runs and carrier landings. I could sit and watch that stuff for hours, as goofy as that sounds. And then when the video goes, when it's done, they say, and listen, I have a GoFundMe page. I've asked people to, and in the past, I've raised a good amount of money that paid for all my equipment and stuff. And the studio, part of the studio where I did my video cast show. I mean, you all supported that. And so I'm not really ragging on these people so much, but they have on there, if you like these videos, you can donate and support us. And I'm thinking to myself, I mean, I'm shocked that people actually send money into this stuff, but they do. I don't know where I was going with that, but anyway, where was I going with that? Stand by. I literally just stopped the recording so I could go back and listen to what I was saying. Now, the reason I brought this whole thing up about the video game is because people are duped into sending money for this, so that they can watch the videos that are free on YouTube. Right? So that's how gullible people are with their money. And they are, when these Q people will take these Q posts that are filled with numbers. My book, whoever does this used to put my book up there all the time, Sheep No More, or they put up numbers, and when you put it into Google, it would come up with my book title. Very strange. I don't know. Maybe I know some of the people that are part of Q. I don't know. If they are, they need to call me so I can get a cut of whatever they're freaking making off this. But people send in money to these people's videos where they are supposedly reading and figuring out the numerology of what this Q person's actually putting in code. It's kind of turned into a game now. And what they don't realize is that, like, they'll research it out like crazy, but they won't go research these scams, which this is like the third time this scam in recent history has been. Even the same terminology, trust the plan, the storm is coming, TikTok, all that stuff's been used before in financial crime games that they're playing, and swindled a lot of people out of a lot of money. Ridiculous. So the point of all this is that you have to be careful with it's a waste of time to debate these people, but don't listen to them. There's so many people out there that are saying this is nothing. And I mean, I've even sat back and said, are we being told everything? Is this really as bad as I think? Or as my buddy says that it is? Or are we being played for fools? But you know what? Here's the bottom line, folks. After this is all over with, we'll figure it out. We'll know. If you're smart, we'll figure it out if it was something or not. But in reality, right now, what you should be doing is preparing for the worst possible scenario. And for the next 15 to 20 days or however long it is, write it out. And if you need cash, you need to start thinking outside the box, how you can make it. Online, do whatever you got to do, tutoring people online. I mean, whatever you got to do, make your cash, and you'll make it through this. Don't be shy to borrow money from somebody if you have to, or whatever. This is a situation we have never faced before. And a lot of people are going to gain friends and lose friends through this situation. I guarantee it. But the point of this whole rant and the story about the video games and stuff is that you should just prepare yourself for the worst. And not panicking, just prepare yourself for the worst. And if anything, you're training yourself for the next time this potentially happens. It'll happen again. May not be in our lifetime, but it'll happen again. Although I do think it's going to happen again. I mean, one tweet I put out today was, let me read it here. Let me pull that up real quick. Because this dawned on me because I was reading a story about there's been 5 earthquakes in the past day in the Carolinas and Tennessee, I believe. Let me see here. Let me pull up this tweet. Here it is. Let's see. This is the tweet. It says, let's see. Check global plague. Check war and rumors of wars. Check earthquake. 5 in the last day in Carolinas and Tennessee. Check Israel is a state. And then I tabbed down and said, y'all might want to take a moment and get right with Jesus because there's some stuff happening right now. I don't know if you guys know this, but there is a passage in Revelations where it talks about there will be 2 prophets that will be killed, and they will be laid in the square, kind of like town square, for all the world to see. And there's never been, and this is chilling when you think about it, there's never been a time in the history of man that we know of where the whole world could gaze upon 2 dead bodies. And right now, the whole world could see it if there's a camera there or if somebody takes a video. Pretty interesting stuff that was predicted several thousand years ago. That was just a side note. All right. Let me wrap this up here a little bit. I said last week, and I'm going to reiterate that, and I'm going to stand by it. I think the mainstream media, the New York Times today, this woman, unbelievable. Woman takes Trump's quote completely out of context. I mean, absolutely out of context. After his presser that he had, and let me see if I can find it here. So she says, respirators, ventilators, quote, this is what she was saying that the president said in his presser, quote, respirators, ventilators, all of the equipment, try getting it yourself, unquote. And then she goes on to say, Mr. Trump told the governors during the conference call, a recording of which was shared with the New York Times. Now, here's the reality of what President Trump actually said. Let me scroll down here because my good buddy Dan Bongino actually, and several other people actually tweeted out what the president actually said. He said, we'll be backing you, but try getting it yourself. Point of sale's much better, much more direct if you can get it yourself. So she left that part out. He did say you should try to get it yourself because point of sale is much better, but we will be backing you. But you should still try to get it yourself. In other words, you're going to get it faster if you do it yourself. But the government will back you and you'll eventually get it. The president knows about this red tape. He's not an idiot. He sees what's happening. He sees that part of it anyway. I'm sure he sees that part all the time. New York Times and the mainstream media and the stuff that they're doing, I turn on CNN or MSNBC, any other time, I still don't agree with it, but any other time, it's gossip. Even though I do believe it falls under slander and defamation and should be, the Supreme Court should look at this stuff because definitely what they're doing right now in this national emergency is they're doing the same thing as if they went out and incited a riot or if they went into a theater and screamed fire. That they're taking this situation that is very dangerous and they're making it more dangerous. And that is not protected speech according to the Supreme Court. And I think the Supreme Court should look at that right now. I don't care if they have to do it telecommuting. They should look at that right now and say the mainstream media and these outlets are violating free speech. They're not being protected, or the things that they're doing is not protected by free speech, and they're actually becoming a threat to the country, and they should be pulled off air, or they should be not allowed to print for a period of time until this is over with. I don't think, and I had this debate with Dr. Lucarini today. We ended up talking about this instead of medicine. Well, we talked about both, but he thinks that's a slippery slope. While he agrees with me that what they're doing does not meet the threshold of the First Amendment and is not protected speech, he says he feels, and I should have him on here to talk about this instead of saying it in his words, but that it's a slippery slope and we should not go down that road. I disagree. And I think this is one of the games that's been played on us. The American people think that the media is what the founding fathers were talking about when they said freedom of speech and freedom of the press. But they were not talking about media. And they were not talking about the ability of a business to subvert this country on behalf of a political party. That's not what they were talking about. That technically is, and in a lot of ways, I mean, they were using China's talking points last week. Yes. So I don't think that is protected speech. And I think it's a national security issue. And I think that it's not, if the Supreme Court did their job and actually looked at this stuff from not an elitist standpoint, but from a realist, the same thing with abortion. I've talked about that before. That's the stupidest decision ever. I don't care. I know people that probably listen to this are pro-choice, but the reality is you and science, and definitely not the courts, can tell anyone where life begins. I know I've looked at it under a microscope we took the eggs and the sperm out of a starfish, and then we fertilized the egg under the microscope, and I sat there and watched life begin. and I watched the egg start to multiply into different cells. Fascinating. And there's nobody there was no, it was not mechanical. Put it to you that way. There was definitely something was brewing, and the creation of life had already started. That which we put under a microscope would become a starfish, and that which is in your body will become a human. So at what point does the Constitution stop protecting that life? You can't tell me, because it's alive. It's already in the process of becoming a life. So if that's the case, then we've been played for fools. And it's the same thing with the media. The founding fathers did not intend, when they said freedom of the press, they were talking about the printing press and your ability to disseminate information either by your voice or through printed means, because that's the only means they had at that point, other than carving on a rock. So they put that in there. They were not intending for these big media businesses to be able to manipulate information in a very dangerous and detrimental way to national security and public safety. Voting is public safety and national security, folks. You vote for the wrong person. Look what happened in Germany. So I don't think they're protected, and I think that what they're doing now is a national security threat and is not protected, and they should be yanked. The FCC or whoever has to do it should shut them down, and then potentially come back after this threat. But now they've proven that they are not news organizations, which I don't. The other thing about the media, here's another game that's been played on you. If you stole a car and then you gave somebody else that car and they knowingly took a stolen car, they're going to go to jail. It's the same thing with classified information. If you walk into somehow do one of those Tom Cruise things where you get in the Pentagon, you steal information, and then you knowingly give it to another person, and they're going to do nefarious things with it, like give it to another country, you and the person you gave it to are going to go to jail. So there's nothing in the Constitution that protects the media when somebody leaks information and gives it to them. That's a game that's been played on you. That's a total game, and it's a scam. But we don't stand up to this stuff. That's my solution, and that is the end of the show. Remember, folks, I depend on you to promote this show. We are cruising up fast. I think right now, as of the airing of this podcast, we're at number 34 on iTunes news commentary. And we're climbing. I was up to 31, and I've been as high as 24. But with your help, we can climb this thing all the way to the top. I really believe that the fans that have tuned in to the previous experts video cast and now this, we can take it to the top. And if you're new to this show, I'm here for you, because as I've always said, and I maintain, wherever you see my face or you hear my voice, the truth has arrived. It's that simple. You don't have to go find me and look for me on the radio now or television. I'll be right here. This is the platform. Let's take this to the top, and I can promise you, I will guarantee you, you will hear from experts. If I'm not an expert in that field, or I don't get the information from the expert, I won't talk about it until I do. I'm Jonathan Gilliam, and this is The Experts. Peace, and we're out of here. Now, y'all go on home now and wash your damn hands. Get out of here. Peace.